All right, the recording has started. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Katie Zimmerman from Lake Johnson. Thank you for joining us for our environmental lecture series. We are going to enjoy a presentation from Delaney. I'll let her introduce it in just a minute. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along. You can throw them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat and can repeat those questions whenever there is an appropriate time to do so. But we will also have about 10 minutes at the end of the lecture for you to be able to ask those questions as well. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Delaney to introduce herself and get us started.
Alrighty, hi everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick, make sure everything's working there. Um, let's see. Can you guys, oh, can you guys see my screen right here with the presentation? Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
it looks great.
Perfect. Okay. So like she said, my name is Delaney. I am a PhD student at NC State. So my long title is Graduate Research and Extension Assistant at NC State. So I also work with Extension Forestry. And as part of that job, I get to come do talks like this and share science with people, basically, science with the public. Today, I'm going to be talking about insects in the woods, the good, the bad, and the invasive. So for my research, I work in the Forest Health Lab at NC State. So again, I work within the field of forest health, which I'll touch on in just a minute. And we primarily focus on invasive insects, which is also what this this talk will primarily focus on today. So jumping right in, what is forest health? So forest health, the definition of a healthy forest can kind of change with different perspectives. So on one hand, one end of the spectrum, we've got the utilitarian perspective, which really looks at forest as a resource. Um, so it's kind of what can we produce, what can we use this forest to produce, what can we gain from it, that kind of thing. A healthy forest from this perspective might look like a forest that is producing the products that we want. So it's producing a high timber yield. It has a high quality product as well, something like that. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have our ecological perspective. So from our ecological perspective, we're going to be focusing more on ecosystem functions. So a healthy forest from this perspective might look like something that conducts or is able to process all its ecosystem functions, or excuse me, ecosystem services. So things like water filtration, erosion control, wildlife resources, things like that. Um, so again, kind of different, but the one thing that the two ends of the spectrum can agree on, and kind of anywhere in between, can agree on that a healthy forest has resilience and has stability. So resilience refers to our ability to withstand damage or change, versus stability refers to the ability to get back to an equilibrium despite disturbances happening. So a disturbance can refer to something like a wildfire. It can refer to a pest outbreak, something that we'll talk about a little bit more later. It can be anthropogenic, so things like, again, management tactics or techniques used in the forest, things like that. But what are our other factors influencing forest health? So again, I kind of mentioned this a second ago. We have our anthropogenic disturbances. So this can be things, again, that all kind of lead back to human behavior. So first, of course, we have our changing climates or our climate change, and how our forests are going to respond to that. So it can be things like warmer temperatures, different amounts of rainfall to be expected, things like that. Um, we also have our management issues or our management practices. The picture here that I've used shows a really poorly managed forest, depending on kind of, from most perspectives, whether it's the ecological one or the production standpoint or the utilitarian perspective. This is not ideal. So this is a very overstocked forest. You can tell that the undergrowth on the forest is or on the forest floor is very sparse. It all seems to be one species, and the trees are all very, very tight together. So they're kind of having to compete more for resources. So things like this can lead to more stress on our trees, and influence how our different I guess, disturbances, so to say, will influence or how will impact our forest and how their ability to withstand damage. We also have things like pollution here. This little picture is supposed to be acid rain, something that unfortunately does impact our forests. We also have things like water pollution, air pollution, of course, all circling back and connecting to it all. Looking at our abiotic factors influencing forest health, we have drought and water stress. So think about it this way. If you are tired and exhausted, running low on energy, things like that, or resources, you're more likely to get sick or feel worse when you do get sick than if you're happy and healthy. So if we have stress from drought and water, or lack of water, or too much water sometimes, you're more likely to fall susceptible to pest diseases, things like that. Same thing, we also have weather events that can cause disturbances themselves. So this can be things like tornadoes or hurricanes that are going to come through and wipe out a large swath of trees potentially, and really reshape how our forest is going to look. We also have wildfire. Note that wildfire is different than our forest fires. However, that's a whole nother topic I could get into. Wildfire, we're going to be, when we refer to wildfire, I'm talking about the unwanted and potentially too powerful because of maybe bad management practice or something. Um, so those fires, again, that kind of get out of hand and are more destructive than usual. So moving on, we have our our biotic factors. So this is really kind of the crux of what a lot of forest health professionals work with. So we have invasive plants. Does anybody happen to know what this plant is? This one, if you happen to recognize it, this one is our tree of heaven, or Ailanthus. Um, And again, not to spoil anything, but we will be talking about this a little bit later as well. This is a preferred host for spotted lanternfly, which again, we'll be chatting about in a minute. Um, but we also have our pathogens and diseases they cause. Those are one of the most important things to talk about when we talk about forest health. And of course, we also have our insects, which is what we'll be focusing on today. So looking at our insects, there we go. We can kind of break down our insects into two categories. We have our native insects and our invasive insects. So our native insects are going to be the ones that are found in the ecosystems that it evolved within. An example of this is going to be our southern pine beetle, so something that is native to the southeast and can be found in North Carolina. We also have our invasive insects. These are insects that are found in an ecosystem where it did not originally evolve. So meaning it is not, it did not evolve with the trees around here, it did not evolve into this ecosystem. An important part that, or I guess the thing that makes an insect invasive is not only where it's from, but also how much damage it does to this novel ecosystem that it's now a part of. Invasive insects or invasive organisms in general do unfortunately cause harm. That is kind of one of the criteria for being considered invasive. So looking at this, looking at all those factors I talked about, but specifically through the lens of insects, we kind of want to know, what's the big deal? Why do we care? Um, so looking at this, all those factors I named, again, specifically looking at insects now, can cause tree or stand mortality. So stand referring to essentially a group of trees in the forest. It can be forest-wide or smaller, multiple stands making up a forest. But when we see those trees or stands die off, it's going to have massive impacts on the ecosystems that exist within. And even if they don't die, even if those trees do manage to live, we often see other negative consequences, such as reduced growth and productivity. So looking from the utilitarian perspective, that can mean a loss of product or lower yield. And that means the growers are going to lose money. Money does kind of make the world go around, so that is going to be very important and is a very strong motivator for a lot of people. Outside of that lens, though, we are also going to see compromised ecosystem services when we have reduced growth and productivity. A combination of the two of those, an example of the combination of the two of those can be lower carbon sequestration. So carbon sequestration can be used, or is more commonly used as you can get carbon credits basically to offset other carbon production. So that can be an example of people wanting to purchase that and use it as a resource. However, it also just provides a good service to the rest of the planet, essentially. So when we have lower reduced growth or even some loss of life, that's when we get into lower carbon sequestration rates, which is an unfortunate thing. We also have sometimes we'll see a lower quality of wildlife resources when we have reduced growth and productivity. So again, those plants that the deer are eating are going to be less nutritional or nutritious less nutritious. So they're going to have to eat more in order to get the same value from them than they previously would have, meaning the resources in the forest are going to be stretched thin, unfortunately. So again, all these things kind of shape into why we care about our forest. When we have massive die-offs, that can lead to shifts in our ecosystem structure. So this picture here on the right is a really good example of that. If you look at this picture here, or on the left side, this mountain, you can tell it's kind of drab and gray. That's because of all these trees, all these spruce trees on this mountain have been killed off. So all of these are dead. As compared to this picture right here, or this mountain right here, it's got our bright live green trees. So when this many tree die, something else has to come in to replace those. In Colorado, where this picture is taken, that's going to be aspen. But another example of that, something more relevant to North Carolina, is the American chestnut. So looking back, so about 100 years ago, or a little bit more, we had the Great American Chestnut, which was a prolific tree. It shaped the forest throughout the Appalachians. And this picture, it's a little bit blurry, but you can see right here, these kind of darker figures are people. So you can see how large these trees were, meaning how long they had been there and how they had shaped the forest for hundreds of years. But around 100 years ago, a little bit more, the chestnut blight came through and they wiped out almost all of the American chestnut, completely reshaping our forest. So now if we walk out into the woods, especially in the western part of our state, we're not going to see almost any American chestnut. Instead, we'll find things like maple and oaks. Such as an example of, again, an entire shift in an ecosystem, how drastically it changed and how rapidly. But coming back to our insects and the damage caused by them, looking at our native insects, we do see that large-scale damage is still possible. So it's not just our invasive ones that are capable of damage. Um, though one thing to note is that because these trees and insects typically evolve together, that's when we kind of have this natural system of checks and balances. So we'll typically see an outbreak system where there'll be multiple years of low-level populations, a few damaged trees here and there, but nothing crazy, nothing forest scale. And then every now and then, there's a few outbreaks that last a few years. But again, eventually, those natural checks and balances will kind of come back into play and they'll recheck the population so that the pest population is lower again and not doing significant damage for years and years on end. An example of a pest that does this is the southern pine beetle. So again, this is a pest that is native to North Carolina, native to the southeast. But every couple years, typically every 10 or so, sometimes longer, the southern pine beetle will have a significant outbreak, killing hundreds of trees. So right here in this picture, we have all these red trees kind of sprinkled in with everything else. And all of these are pines that have been killed because of southern pine beetle. Um, However, this outbreak will last a couple years, typically around 2 to 4 years. But then those natural checks and balances, so things like natural enemies that exist in this environment, our natural climate will come in and they'll help reduce the population and bring it back to normal. More pine trees will come in to replace this and we'll kind of go back to normal for a few more years. When we look at our invasive insect damage, it's a little bit different. So like I mentioned earlier, these are not found in an ecosystem where they typically or where they originally evolved, meaning those trees that they use as host do not have natural defenses to them typically, meaning there's fewer checks and balances that kind of help keep their populations and their damage within a tolerable level. So because of that, that often means these insects require more intense management than a lot of our native insects do. So jumping right into our invasive insects that we're going to be talking about today, because we're going to be talking about 4 different ones, starting with the emerald ash borer. So emerald ash borer is a wood-boring beetle. It attacks ash trees and occasionally white fringe tree, though the ash tree is its preferred host. There are multiple different species of ash native to North America, and unfortunately, it does attack all of them. So bad news for ash trees, unfortunately. In its native range, which is Asia, it does attack ash trees as well. However, those trees again are co-evolved, so they have some natural defenses that help protect them a little bit better. In 2002, emerald ash borer was found in the US for the first time, and since then it has actually spread to 37 states. And unfortunately, it does include North Carolina. So in 2013, emerald ash borer was found in North Carolina for the first time. So since then, it has basically been found in the entirety of North Carolina, except for a few of our counties on the eastern part of the state. Um, it is likely that it is in some of these counties just because of how prolific this insect is. Unfortunately, just our resources to always monitor isn't aren't always available, but we do our best. And this is why things like this are fantastic. So having people like you that care about our natural resources, things like that, learning about these insects and these pests can help us know where they are better. If you guys are able to spot them, share that with us. We can then use that to help effectively manage these pests as best as possible and help protect our forest resources. So looking at what emerald ash borer actually does to our trees. The larvae they feed on xylem. Sorry, just saw this question pop up. Yes, emerald ash borer are in Wake County. I think they were found in Wake County in 2015. Um, but
While you are answering questions, Leah also wanted to know what anthropogenic factors means.
oh, sorry. So that is going to be factors related to human activity. So does that
Thank
make
you.
sense? Yeah, of course. Also, yeah, sorry, I can only sometimes see the questions pop up. So if there's anything that needs
Oh,
attention, feel free to yell out.
oh, you're good. I am monitoring it, and I was just waiting for a good moment to. I didn't want to interrupt your flow.
No, yeah, perfect. Okay, sweet. Um, So back to what these trees, or excuse me, what these bugs do to our trees. So they are wood-boring beetles, so the larvae do live inside these trees. The larvae will feed on the xylem and the phloem. So the xylem and the phloem is the vascular tissue of the tree. It's the tissue that helps move the water and the nutrients back and forth in the throughout the tree system. So kind of like our veins move blood and, important things back and forth for us. Um, so when these larvae feed on those, they are effectively strangling the tree. They cut off the pathways for this water and these nutrients to go back and forth. And again, that does kill the tree. Unfortunately, once a tree is infested, if it is not treated or the insect isn't managed in some way, tree that does typically occur in about 5 years, sometimes longer. And in a heavily infested area, that can mean that 90% of trees are dead within 10 years. Emerald ash borer does have a total of a 99% mortality rate, so meaning in an area where it has been around for a long time, 99% of those ash trees are going to be killed by emerald ash borer, which is devastating. So this is another example of something that will likely be an insect that resets our forest ecosystems, unfortunately. Ash provide a lot of valuable ecosystem resources or ecosystem services, primarily water filtration. They are commonly used in wetland restoration projects, things like that. So they've actually been planted for conservation efforts for a long time. So seeing them be wiped out by this insect is really devastating. And again, it is horrible to see. At one of our sites where that people in my lab work with, we have a planting of over 32,000 of ash trees, and I think there are about 176 that are surviving in good condition at this point. Numbers are might be a little iffy. But again, if that kind of gives you scale of how intense this pest is. But again, that's why we need you guys to help us find where it is, especially in those counties where it hasn't been reported yet. So we need you guys to be able to recognize them and then share that with us. So starting with our identification part of that process, when we're looking at this beetle, we see the adults are going to be this iridescent green. They're typically about half an inch long, so this is it compared to a penny. This might be slightly small on the small side. They can often be a little bit bigger than this. But again, it's this beautiful iridescent green beetle, and that is something you will see April through June. So the adults are present for about 3 months of the year. Like I said earlier, the larvae live inside the tree, so it's not something we're typically going to be able to see, at least not easily. However, there are signs and symptoms we can use instead to help us kind of identify this if we miss the adults. So we have our D-shaped exit hole right here. As I mentioned, the larvae live in the tree, they pupate there, and they turn into adults. And then at that point, they need to leave the tree. So they bore out of the tree. They are what's considered a flathead borer. So as you can tell, this kind of looks like a semicircle or a D turned upside down or turned on its side. Um, Something like that is a great indicator. If you see this on an ash tree, really good chance that is going to be emerald ash borer. Another thing you can look for is something we call blonding. Blonding is damage by woodpeckers. So they are actually trying to feed on the insects, specifically the emerald ash borer larvae, underneath the bark. So they will land on the tree and kind of peck away at this layer of bark, leaving this bright, almost yellow, light brown color that's again very stark contrast to the typical ash bark. So again, a great kind of diagnostic tool. So emerald ash borer, I see a comment in the question or a comment in the chat. It says, how do emerald ash borers come here? Do emerald ash borers lay their eggs in the tree? Okay, so for the first one, they are moved through wood packaging material. So they are wood boring beetles, meaning again the larvae are inside wood. So then sometimes that wood can be used to create, say, a crate or something like that. And if they're not properly treated, that can move the insects that are inside of it around. There's a popular campaign called "Don't Move Firewood," or that uses a slogan "Buy local, burn local." That's referring to our firewood. So kind of the same thing. So not necessarily wood packaging materials, but again, another wood product. Um, we want to buy our firewood where we burn it, so that we are not risking moving insects like these that might be inside it around. So if you do that, highly recommend switching to the or if you camp a lot, that kind of thing, I highly recommend switching to the buy it where you burn it process. That helps prevent spread of invasives like this. As for where they lay their eggs, they do lay their eggs kind of on the bark of the tree. And then once they hatch, the emerald ash borer larvae will kind of bore further in. However, the eggs are very, very small and not a great identification tool. They're very hard to spot. Alrighty. So if you do find this insect, what should you do? So if you are in a county where emerald ash borer has not been previously recorded, so one of those coastal counties and a little bit in, you're going to want to report it to your NC Forest Service county ranger. If you look on their website, they have a list of county rangers for every county, so you can just find your county and it'll have a link directly to their contact information. So you can report it to them. If you are not in a county where it's previously been recorded, so if you're in the vast majority of the state, you can reach out to NC State Extension Forestry for management recommendations. Again, this insect does have a mortality rate of 99%. So if you want to protect your trees, you must manage for it, and typically that is going to look like chemical treatment. I don't have time to get into all the management options for emerald ash borer today in this talk, maybe in the question portion at the end. But again, if you go to NC Extension Forestry, we do have a whole plethora of resources there. I will have that linked with a QR code at the very end of the presentation, so we'll also be able to share it that way. Alrighty, so moving to our next insect. One that you guys might have heard about before. Can I get a thumbs up from anybody if you guys have seen this before? Just curious. But this one is one that is making headlines all the way or all across the country, especially the eastern part of the state. So it's something you might have heard about if you are from this area or maybe from up north, say Pennsylvania, New York, that kind of area. So like I said, it makes headlines constantly. I was looking at some of these earlier today, and I think there were 3 or 4 with spotted lanternfly in the headline published within the last few hours. So again, this thing is hot gossip, basically. Um, so spotted lanternfly, unlike what the name suggests, is not a fly, and unlike what it looks like, it is actually not a moth. Many people think it is one of those two. Spotted lanternfly is a plant hopper, so it's a unique type of insect. They use their piercing sucking mouth part, so it's kind of like they have a straw attached to their face to insert that into a tree or a plant and feed from the phloem. So again, the liquid nutrients that's inside of a tree. These plant hoppers are native to Asia, but they were found in the US in 2014. Since then, they have been found in a total of 8 states, including North Carolina, where it was found in 2022, so relatively recently. In North Carolina, can be found in 4 counties, so Forsyth County, Guilford County, Rockingham County, and Caldwell County. And this pest is a little bit different than our emerald ash borer. It's not typically a forest pest in the way that some of the other ones that we've been talk or that I'll talk about are. And so this one is more of a forest pest, nuisance pest, and agricultural pest. So when we're looking at our urban forest trees, so our street trees, things that are going to be in your yard, lining the streets of Raleigh, that kind of thing. Um, we're luckily finding that this is not much of a tree killer. So we will take it. We'll take a win where we can get one. However, like I did say, it is a nuisance pest. They do gather in masses, and they will gather in masses outside of um, forest settings. So here, this picture on the left was taken at a rather famous location in, or Chipotle location in Philadelphia. Um, these spotted lanternfly decided they should swarm. They have a mating swarm outside of the doors of a Chipotle. It lasted for about 3 days. And as you can see, there are hundreds, if not thousands, because this is only one angle. They were across the whole doorway. Um, and they ended up, the Chipotle had to open a door, a side door that customers don't typically access in order to let people in because they couldn't close down for multiple days. But again, these insects set up camp and decided to stay there when they're in that many numbers. What do you do? Because sure, you can try to shoo them away or you can smush them or kill them or something. When there's that many, it's going to leave a massive mess. And on that note, these guys are, like I said, they're phloem feeders. So they feed on the liquid nutrients inside of a plant. So they produce something called honeydew. It's this really sticky substance. It's a byproduct of their feeding. And that then grows sooty mold. So it's just kind of this nasty mess of sticky, icky byproducts, basically, that are there. So another reason people do not like them. There are also agricultural pests. Um, so while they don't always feed on trees, they do have a total of 100 different hosts that they can feed on, including Tree of Heaven, which is that invasive tree that I was talking about earlier. Um, but here in North Carolina, part of our agricultural concerns or concerns with this pest in our agricultural settings are going to be our grapevines and our hops. So anybody that is a fan of our beer and wine is unfortunately going to be disappointed. So these guys can reduce production of both our grapevines and our hops. Um, and again, that's no good news for any kind of producers of those agricultural products. Um, in North Carolina, we haven't had massive impacts yet. However, we know it is possible, so we're looking to hopefully manage this proactively as much as possible. So looking for identification, what you guys should be looking for. It will depend on the time of year. So June through November is when our adults are active, and those are those very charismatic adults that we typically think of when we think of spotted lanternfly, the ones that kind of look like moths. Um, However, beginning in September, oops, they are going to be laying their eggs. And these egg masses are going to be attached to any kind of solid surface. It's typically any kind of tree or fence post or, any solid object nearby. Sometimes they can attach it to sides of trucks or things like that. But it just looks like this muddy splotch, so to say. Then that is how they will overwinter. So from September all the way through May, we'll just see those muddy splotches around. If you see them, you can scrape them off and help reduce the population for next year. Um, Otherwise, in May, we'll start to see these guys. So these are going to be our young instars. They're small, they are black with white speckles on them, and they're going to look relatively the same. They'll get a little bit larger through about July, maybe June or so, where they will then turn red. And they again will have these white speckles on them. They'll feed more aggressively on the plants. Um, and then that is when we get to the point where our life cycle will repeat again. So if you spot this one, if you are outside of a known infestation, so outside of Forsyth County, Guilford County, Rockingham County, or Caldwell County, you're going to want to report this to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. I've linked the form right here, which again, I will have a few more resources for you guys at the end of this presentation. But again, this is going to be the easiest way to report it to the state. We do want to keep track of where it is at all times. So if you spot it and you're not where it's already found, please tell us. It'll be huge help, especially for if you like wine and beer, things like that. If you want to keep our wine and beer production as safe as possible, knowing where it is will help us complete that. Or yeah. So then again, if you're looking for management recommendations, if you're inside those infestation zones, you can look at NC State Extension Forestry at our webpage there. We have a plethora of resources for that as well. And then yes, I see you guys answered it, beat me to it in the chat. So yes, it is a plant hopper, very similar to a leaf hopper. It is in the order Hemiptera, which is, not to get too into the weeds, actually very, very far off away from our flies and moths. It's a misleading name and they look a little bit confusing. So, but again, it is a plant hopper, so it is neither a fly or a moth. Alrighty, so jumping on to our next insect here, we've got our Asian longhorn beetle, another one of these that is just cool to look at, if I'm being honest. I think it's beautiful. Unfortunately, it's very bad for our trees. So this is another one of our wood borers. Just like our emerald ash borer, the larvae bore into the tree where they will grow until they pupate and turn into an adult. However, unlike our emerald ash borer, who only feed at the surface of the tree or just under the surface of the bark, our Asian longhorn beetle burrow much further into the tree. And not only that, they are also much larger than our emerald ash borer. So they unfortunately have the effect of turning our tree into a little bit of Swiss cheese. So right here, you can kind of see it in this picture. Those holes, again, they're quite large. They scatter throughout the tree, kind of swerve and zigzag throughout the tree, which does unfortunately compromise the structural integrity of our trees, making them much less stable than they should be. So this is another pest that is native to Asia, but has been found in the US. It was first found in 1996, but on a good turn of events, it has actually not been found in North Carolina yet. So this is unlike the other insects we have been talking about so far. Again, it is not currently found in North Carolina, which is, again, a great thing. And double good news, this pest can be eradicated, but again, it depends on early detection and early management, which is why you guys are so, so important. So looking at where else it has been found in the country, it's been found in a total of 5 states, including South Carolina. Again, not North Carolina, but South Carolina. And with this pest, it is federally regulated. So when it is found in a new area, they go in and set up a very strict quarantine. There's procedures for how to leave this area with any kind of resources that might harbor some of these insects, anything like that. So there's restrictions on how to move those kind of things around, and strict practices that go in and remove host trees. So through these practices, we have actually been able to eradicate it. So anywhere you see green on this map is where it has previously been eradicated. Again, this is unlike a lot of other pests where typically we don't have that case. Typically, we have to learn how to live with it. So looking at how we identify this and how you guys can look or know what it is, we can first start with our signs and symptoms. So looking at, again, we're going to be looking for that exit hole. So this one it's going to differ from our emerald ash borer in that it is going to be completely round. Remember, our emerald ash borer was going to be a D-shaped exit hole versus this one is a complete circle with relatively smooth edges. In North Carolina, or excuse me, in South Carolina, it is going to be about the size of a pencil or a Sharpie. There is evidence that down here in the South they are larger. So again, more of that Sharpie size versus up north, it's typically about the size of a number 2 pencil. Surveyors will actually put their pencils inside of an exit hole to kind of help determine if that is the right size for what they're looking for. So again, in North Carolina, or excuse me, in the South, it's a little bit larger than that. So here in North Carolina, if you were to run across it, it might be something like the size of a Sharpie. We also have our egg niches, which are pictured here. They are the rough edge ones. And this is where the adults will chew to lay their eggs. So again, the eggs are laid kind of at the surface of the bark. These egg niches are known to do something called weeping, which is pictured right here. So it really does just kind of look like the tree it has been crying and maybe its mascara is running down its face. But it's a great thing to look out for and can be a fantastic diagnostic tool. If you look for these signs and symptoms on the host trees, again, this is kind of an indicator you might have Asian longhorn beetle. This insect has a very large host range. However, its favorite seems to be red maple. But now moving on to the beetle itself, Um, this beetle is going to be relatively large. It's about 1.5 inches long, not including the antennae. So again, this is a longhorn beetle or a beetle with long antennae. Um, Sometimes they can be the same length as the body, sometimes they can be even longer, like in that first picture I showed you guys. So this beetle, again, it's about 1.5 inches long, not including the antennae, and they are typically black with white speckles. They have white and black banding on their antennae. This picture doesn't quite do it justice, but typically those white bands can also have a tinge of blue to them, and it's actually really beautiful. Their feet can also be a bluish color, but again, kind of varies a little bit. Um, However, one thing to be on the lookout with this one is that we do have a native lookalike. So that one is the one that is pictured here on the right. We have a native lookalike called the white-spotted pine sawyer. It is another longhorn beetle with banded antennae. It's black and white speckles. However, there's going to be one key difference that is going to always help you differentiate it. The white-spotted pine sawyer has a white spot, as the name would suggest, right where the wings will meet. So right up here in the middle of its back versus the Asian longhorn beetle does not have that. So again, that's a fantastic different way to differentiate the two beetles. If you do find the Asian longhorn beetle or even suspect that you might, you can report that to, again, the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services by emailing badbug@ncag.gov. In that email, you want to include a picture and a location and kind of some information about how they can, excuse me, come back and see that pest or see that potential identification. You can also report it to the USDA using a reporting form, but this one is more direct to our state resources, or the email is more direct to our state resources. Alrighty. And then moving on to our very last insect that we are going to be talking about, and one that is dear to my heart. So as I mentioned, I am a PhD student at NC State University. I work in the forest health lab, so that means I study some of these invasive insects, and this is the one that my research focuses on. So elm zigzag sawfly, again, it has a special place in my heart. I'm a little biased, obviously, but I still love it. So elm zigzag sawfly, as the name suggests, is a sawfly that feeds on elms in a zigzag pattern. Um, this is a very unique insect, and I think, honestly, quite frankly, adorable as well. Um, so this is a pest that is native to Asia and is a defoliator of elms. So that means it feeds on the leaves of elm trees and has recently been found to also feed on the leaves of Zelkova. So Zelkova is another type of tree within the same family as elms, and it is a really common street tree. So it's a really common urban planting, something you guys might see along new developments or along the sidewalk, that kind of thing. Luckily, we do know that Zelkova is not a preferred host. It seems to be something that they only feed on during or when there's no other host available. So when there are no elms available, it might feed on a Zelkova, but typically will not. Um, Additionally, when we're talking about the host of this pest being an elm, we do need to talk about the history of elms. So elms were one of the most common, if not the most common street tree across most of Eastern America for a very long time, up until about the late 60s, early 70s, when a disease called Dutch elm disease came through, and it wiped out the vast majority of them. It killed over 100 million elms, which is a catastrophic number. Again, it's another one of those examples of reshaping our forest ecosystems. But while that is a massive number and it did drastically change our forests, the look of our forest, there are still elms out there. They're still used as street tree plantings. They're still common, or they're still maybe not common, but they're still in our forest providing valuable ecosystem services and providing aesthetic value to our streets. So it's something we still want to protect as much as possible. Focusing back on the bug, so elm zigzag sawfly, or EZS for short, was found in the United States in 2021, and then it was found in North Carolina in 2022. As of the end of 2025, it can be found in 15 states, including North Carolina. So as a defoliator, this insect typically is not a tree killer. So that's a great sign, especially for our elms that are already threatened. However, when we see defoliators completely defoliate trees year after year, that's when we get into risk of branch dieback or even tree mortality. Think about it this way. If a tree has an energy storage, kind of like a battery, and it recharges its battery using its life, or excuse me, using its leaves. If those leaves are continuously eaten away, it can't recharge its battery. It's constantly living off it and slowly depleting it. Once that battery is fully depleted, the tree will unfortunately die. So that seems to be what is happening with some of our trees in North Carolina. I want to emphasize some. It is not all of them, but we have seen it happening. So this picture right here on this of this tree was taken in 2022, and we can see this tree is nearly entirely defoliated. It was taken in August of 2022, so something, or so a time of year that this tree should be bright green and fully leafed out. Um, every year since then, we have seen a very similar picture, luckily not quite as bad, but still severely defoliated. And unfortunately, we have been getting reports of branch dieback, which can, if not stopped, lead to tree mortality. So that this tree could die in the next few years if this if this damage continues at the same level for the next few years. Again, I do want to stress that this tree or this pest is not necessarily a tree killer. We have some trees that are hardly impacted at all by this, and others that again are severely impacted, as the one that's pictured in this on the screen. But when it comes to identification, again, that's what I want to talk about tonight. So there's two different life stages that you guys might run into. We've got our larvae here on the left. So it's this bright green caterpillar looking insect. It's got a dark band across its eyes and head, and then it's got two T-shaped dark markings over its shoulders. These guys are really small. They'll be on the leaf of an elm leaf or of the elm tree. But again, these are really small. They can be anywhere from about 2 millimeters to half an inch long. So they start really tiny. You have to have a real good eye to spot them. The adults are also about a quarter of an inch to a third of an inch long, so also pretty small. They are black with smoky iridescent wings, and they have these pale yellow legs. Unfortunately, these guys are not always the easiest to spot either, so that can be a little bit difficult. However, they make up for it with their feeding pattern. Again, this one is entirely unique. Elm zigzag sawfly is the only one that feeds in this pattern on elm trees. So if you ever see this zigzag on an elm tree, you know what you've got. It's going to be elm zigzag sawfly every time. So again, it's got these really tiny, unique zigzags, and if you look in the bottom of each zigzag, you can actually see the larva in them. Which I think, again, is adorable, but I am biased, so there's that. But as those larvae grow, they will kind of break out of that zigzag pattern and eventually feed on the entire leaf right here. And in this picture, you can spot some of the older larvae like this, here, and down here. So you can see how much they've grown, how big they are compared to when they were first starting to feed on that leaf. So again, this feeding pattern is going to be one of the best things for you guys to look out for. And if you do see it, you can report it to us directly at NC State, so researchers like myself, by using this QR code. If this QR code should take you to a link where you can fill out a form and basically answer the questions about where are you located, why do you think you've seen it, attach some pictures, or not, sorry, where do you think you've seen it, and then attach some pictures for us to look at, and hopefully we can contact you and get a chance to go actually see the site in person. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, you can also contact the NC Forest Service by contacting your local county ranger, and they can come out and help you as well. For management information, management recommendations, this is something our research has been focusing on a good amount. So there are a lot of resources that we're working on completing and making available for you guys. We do have some available on NC State Extension Forestry's webpage already as well. So that finishes up all four of the insects that we are going to talk about tonight. And that was a lot. And a lot of it was kind of gloom and drew. Not anything great. But I do want to kind of take a second to talk about how important insects are. We did talk about our invasive insects, the ones that are harming our forest. However, a healthy forest ecosystem relies on all of our insects. So we have to have our beneficial insects as well. They can provide all sorts of jobs, things as well known as pollination, things like that, decomposing things. Again, all these things that our forest ecosystems would not look the same without. We also have our parasitoid wasps and our other predators, things that help keep our pest populations in check. So again, while I did talk about a lot of bad bugs tonight, there are so many good ones, all the that again provide a lot of valuable resources to our forests and the ones that we want to keep around as much as possible. So again, that was also a lot of information talking about all those insects. So here I have a QR code that will link you directly to the NC State Extension Forestry Forest Health webpage. So on that webpage, you can see fact sheets for all of these insects and more. You can also find scouting guides. So those are one pagers that have all the information I talked about tonight. So it'll be what those insects look like, what you should look for, when you should look, and what those hosts look like. So it kind of helps you through the host identification as well. On each of those scouting guides, there will also be information about where to report your findings to, so what you should do if you find them again. So again, incredibly important that you guys are out there looking for us and sharing that information with us. It makes our job easier, makes protecting the forest resources in North Carolina that much easier, and something that I think we can all agree on that we want. There are more resources that are on this forest webpage, including range maps and other management recommendations, things like that online. So I highly recommend you checking this webpage out if you're ever interested in anything forest health. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight and now take any questions that you guys have. Um,
Awesome. Thank you so much, Delaney, for that great
oh,
and informative presentation. I do have a couple of questions here. Leah wanted to know what the difference was. She said leaf hopper, but I think that was just because I said leaf hopper. Is a plant hopper like a grasshopper?
so they are going to be a little bit different. When we're looking at insects or kind of all animals, to get a little bit technical with it, um, there's different orders. So when we look at animal taxonomy or the way that things are organized, we have kingdom, phylum, order, and so on. So you know that thing in middle school we learned, King Philip came over for great spaghetti. Um, but that is how things are organized. Within that, we have the kingdom of Animalia, then we have the phylum of arthropods, and then that we have our insects. So from that, we have multiple orders of insects. We have our grasshoppers, which is Orthoptera, and we have our plant hoppers. So they are in two separate orders. So they're going to behave pretty differently. Sorry, this is a very technical answer. I apologize. This is my niche. I'm actually teaching a class about this or helping teach a class about that this spring. So you guys are getting again the long-winded answer here. But they are going to be pretty different because they are in different orders. Our plant hoppers are in the order Hemiptera. They feed on plants exclusively. Again, they all have piercing sucking mouth parts, which is it's a rostrum. It looks like a little straw attached to their mouth, and they use that to insert it directly into the plant. Um, versus our grasshoppers are going to be our grasshoppers, crickets, things like that in the order Orthoptera. A lot of them are either going to be predatory or feed on plant material using chewing mouth parts, which are mandibles. So that could be a big difference between. Sorry, again, that was a long-winded answer. Thanks for sticking with with it through me, but yeah, that was
Awesome.
my little tangent.
Thanks, Delaney. Leah also wanted to know how did the zigzag sawflies get here from Asia?
So that is a great question, and unfortunately is one that we don't necessarily have the answer to. So this pest is native to Asia. However, it's actually been invasive throughout Europe for the last 20 years as well. And preliminary genetic testing that was done a while ago, and there hasn't been a lot of follow-up on. But that first round of genetic testing actually indicates that our populations came from Europe and not Asia.
Hmm.
But the exact mode of transport is unknown. It is theorized that it could be potentially moved over with nursery stock, but not 100% positive. Again, we're not sure. They pupate in the soil, so they go from that larva to adult stage. That transition will happen in the soil um, over winter. So sometimes they think it might drop down into the soil of nursery stock and then it can get moved around. During the summer, though, they also pupate. They build cocoons attached to different surfaces. So things like um, could be containers that are getting moved across the world. That's a potential as well. We're not really sure. And hopefully that's something we'll have more answers for down the road.
Awesome, thank you. And apologies if you answered this already. Where did you share a map of where the sawflies are?
I did not know, but that is a great question. So I'm glad to talk about that actually. Thank you for bringing that up. So Elm's zigzag sawfly is currently found in North Carolina. However, it's only found in two counties in western North Carolina. It's been found in Surrey County and Stokes County. So anybody that's familiar with Pineland Mountain, it's right around there.
Mm.
Has not been found anywhere else. But everywhere in every other state that it has been detected in, it kind of tends to, I don't want to say spreads like wildfire, but they find it in a lot of places all at once. So there's potential that it could be in more places. So again, that comes back to you guys. If you guys help us look and find it, um, tell us. We want to know. We want to know where it is.
Yeah, I can imagine. When I first saw that picture of it, it looks so much like the little tiny inchworms that you see
Mhm.
dangling off of
It
trees.
does.
And I had a moment where it was like, have I been like seeing them? But I assume they don't have silk because they're not
No, that's a great
actually
point.
caterpillars.
Like the inchworms, but they do behave like the inchworms. So if it's dangling on a little string and inching around, it's not our guy. Don't worry.
Great. Good to hear. And then I had a question. This has probably been answered in a multitude of places, but I couldn't remember. Um, so we talked about how the ash borer spreads. How does the lanternfly spread?
That one, okay, that's a great question. So I'm gonna flip back through the slides real quick. Oh, that
Thank
actually works
you.
perfectly. So they attach their eggs to the sides of things. Typically, it can be things like a tree. It can also be the underside of wheel well, or the side of a trucking container, that kind of thing. They can attach it to anything. They are not picky, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, but so that's a fantastic mode of transportation for them. So that's when we often see the spread of this insect along like shipping corridors, so things like that, or trucking corridors, which is exactly why it was found, or one of the reasons we think it was found in North Carolina or in Kernersville, North Carolina, that follows a major trucking route. So
Gotcha. Is it possible that they're also moved on firewood?
it is possible because they can attach their egg masses to things, again, like a tree trunk, if that tree trunk gets cut down, or it's already cut down and they happen upon it. So it's entirely possible. So another great reason to buy local, burn local. Um, but again, yeah, we typically think of shipping containers, but they can attach to anything. So
Great. And then Leah asked a question that I wanted to ask as well. If you wouldn't mind, would I be able to share this PowerPoint? Would you be able to send this
definitely,
PowerPoint to me and I can send it to everybody? There's a lot
definitely,
of great resources in here, and I think that'll make it
yeah,
easier to access.
definitely. I will be glad to do that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Delaney. Any other questions? You can drop them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and just call it out, you're also welcome to raise your hand. We've got another couple minutes here that Delaney can answer some questions. All right, great. Well, if you think of any others, please feel free to reply to the email that I sent you with the information for tonight and the meeting link. I'll be happy to pass your questions on to Delaney. I will also be sending an email out by the end of the week. It will contain a link to this recording that will be going up on YouTube. It will also contain your EE forms. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. Yes, obviously, thank you for joining us. And thank you, Delaney, so much for presenting all of that great information. Let's see, that email should be out by the end of the week in the Environmental Lecture Series YouTube playlist. And we hope to see everyone again during our next lecture. Let me pull up that date and information for you. The next one will be March 9th, and I'm probably mispronouncing this with Naima Furtis. They will be presenting on soil nitrogen prediction using machine learning. So that should be a pretty fascinating lecture, and I hope to see all of you there. Otherwise, have a great night, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you guys so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.